We begin this new worship series entitled Loyalty. We're looking at the loyalty of the saints who have gone before us. Today we begin with the story of Ruth this week and next week, and then we'll continue on. But hear these words at the beginning of the Old Testament book of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you, or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. In chaos theory, the butterfly effect states that a tornado, that is, what time it forms and what path that it blows through, it's influenced by something as small and seemingly insignificant as a butterfly flapping its wings several weeks earlier. That is, this one small change, this one little action can result in something huge, in a big difference later down the road. You know, that seems to happen in our lives as well. I mean, for us, the decisions that we make and the actions that we take can make a huge impact further on down the road. Our decisions, our actions, flapping our little butterfly wings, so to speak, can have far-reaching consequences later. And this is what's happening in the wonderful story of Ruth. Well, which may be the story of Ruth and Naomi, or maybe we'd say it's the story of Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. So once upon a time, back when the judges led the Israelite tribes before there was a king, the judges were actually rulers more so than simply deciders of dispute. So back in the time of the judges, there was a famine. Now, I want to just tell you, pay attention in this story to what's happening, you might say agriculturally, because what's happening in those details are sort of a precursor. They're sort of a glimpse. They're one step ahead of the action that's to come in people's lives. They're that hint about what's going to happen. So because there was a famine in Bethlehem, and that is an irony because Bethlehem is literally the house of bread. There was a famine in the house of bread. A man, Elimelech, took his wife Naomi, their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, left home to get away from this famine, moved to the country of Moab. Now, it should really be Moab, dun dun dun. I mean, that's kind of what it is. I mean, Moab was enemy territory. It was a place that was consistently hostile to Israelites. It was greatly despised and rejected in the Israelite tradition because of the way the Moabites had treated the Israelites. Death followed. There was a famine of food, and now there's a famine of life. Death followed. First, Elimelech died. And then the two sons took Moabite wives. Orpah, not Oprah, really close to Oprah, but Orpah and Ruth. They lived for 10 years, but then the two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, they also died. So now Naomi was left without her husband, without her two sons, in this patriarchal culture where a woman really needed a man to protect and to provide for her. That was just sort of the cultural context. And furthermore, the context of the story isn't really that there was just one widow, there was really three widows. And so the question is, how will they survive? I mean, in a harsh world, again, in this sort of cultural context, especially harsh for women, how will they survive? So Naomi decided that she would go home to Bethlehem. She had heard that once again the Lord was providing food in the house of bread. So she began her journey home. But she turned to her daughters-in-law, both of them, and said, "Go back to your mother's house." Now this term, mother's house, this term occurs only in the context of marriage arrangements. So it would seem that Naomi was urging Orpah and Ruth to look for new husbands. Again, in this cultural context, this patriarchal culture, marriage was really the main way. It was a respectable way for a woman to have social and economic security. And so Naomi, she was hoping that the Lord would provide husbands and homes for these two daughters-in-law. Naomi told her daughters-in-law, "May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Here, deal kindly is a Hebrew word. The Hebrew word is chesed, and it really is much more than just simple kindness. It's the word often used to describe God's acts of unmerited grace and mercy. But as humans, we are also capable of doing or showing chesed to one another. It's this steadfast love. It is loyalty. And it's a loyalty that extends far beyond what might be required. It's giving fully oneself to another with love and compassion. Well, Naomi, she blessed Orpah and Ruth. She said, "May the Lord do chesed upon you as you have shown chesed to those who have died," that is, to Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion, to them and to me. But they said, no, we will return with you. Naomi said, "No, turn back. I can't provide more husbands for you. My life has become bitter." And they cried together, and Orpah, she kissed Naomi, and she turned back. She turned back. But Ruth clung to her. Ruth clung to Naomi. And this is a beautiful picture of chesed, of this loyalty. I mean, she didn't have to. She went far beyond what law and custom required to stand with one in need. And here's the thing about Ruth. She was a foreigner. She was an outsider. She was a foreigner. She was a woman. She was a widow. She was an enemy of Israel. And we're reminded of this over and over again in this story, when the storyteller often calls her not just Ruth, but calls her Ruth the Moabite. Ruth the Moabite. But as Ruth clings to her, she utters some of the most loved verses in Scripture. It's a treasured and profound testimony of faith. And these words are used often, and oftentimes even at weddings, even though they're not uttered in the context of a marriage in the Bible. But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." Ruth's pledge of loyalty is that she will go with, she will lodge with, and she will be buried with Naomi. This is such loyalty, such steadfast love and commitment. Chesed. No wonder it's used often in the course of wedding ceremonies. But not only that, frankly, this is kind of what we say to one another as Jesus' family, as God's family. You know, we say, "You're my family. I'm staying with you." We have the same God. And you know, if you're in person with a group of Christians, you know, you kind of look around sometimes and you might think, you know, outside of church, I might not be friends. I might not be close with these people, but these are my people and I am close with them. When Naomi and Ruth arrived back in Bethlehem, the whole town was buzzing. Hey, Naomi's back. After all this time, Naomi's returned. Naomi's back. But Naomi said to them simply, "Do not call me Naomi any longer. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." And that's what the name Mara means. Bitter. Naomi means sweet or joy, pleasant. But after the difficulties of life, she names herself Mara, bitter. You might know that I have a daughter, and we named her Mara. One of our 3 daughters, our youngest, we've named her Mara. And my wife's name is Joy. And so we named her Mara, Joy, Louk. And of course we like the name Mara, but we recognize, well, like Job this past month, and like Naomi here, that life contains brokenness and blessing, bitterness and joy. And so Naomi says, "Call me Mara now." But you know, when Naomi returned to Bethlehem, she didn't show up alone. She arrived in Bethlehem with Ruth, and it's also interesting that Ruth's name means friend. You know, we're just getting into this story here, but decisions are being made and actions are being taken that are going to end up having some far-reaching consequences. When Naomi and Ruth got back to Bethlehem, it was the beginning of the barley harvest. So there was food again in the house of bread. Still, these were widows, these 2 widows. They had to survive somehow, and of course surviving also means having food to eat. So in order to gain food for Naomi and for herself, Ruth went out to the harvest field and joined the gleaners. Now, we don't really think about gleaners or have gleaners these days with our modern farming methods, but the gleaners followed along behind those who were harvesting so that they could then gather, they could pick up whatever was missed or whatever was left over. It was difficult work. It was a long, hot day's work for a very small gain. And not only that, Ruth really had no protection. I mean, here she was, a Moabite widow. She was a woman, she was a widow, she was a Moabite, right? It was dangerous for her. But the landowner, a man by the name of Boaz, took notice of her and took care of her. He gave her protection and favor. He told the men to leave her alone. Don't mess around with her. He told Ruth where she should go to work, and he gave her water to drink and food to eat as she was going about gleaning. And Ruth said to him, "Why are you doing this for me?" And Boaz said, "I have heard about you. I've heard about all that you have done for your mother-in-law, Naomi." He said, "May the Lord reward you for the decisions you've made and the actions that you've taken." And now here we begin to see just a glimmer, perhaps a glimpse of care, of protection, of provision, of redemption for whoever seeks shelter with the God of Israel. After a long day, Ruth took all that she had gleaned and went back to Naomi. And it turned out it was quite a bit more than what might be expected from this gleaning work. And Naomi said, "Where did you do this? How did you get all of this? You have so much." And Ruth said, "Well, I met the landowner. His name is Boaz." And Naomi blessed the Lord and said, "Oh my goodness, Boaz, he's a relative of my husband, Elimelech, one of our nearest kin. He's a redeeming relative." And Naomi told Ruth to continue going out to the field with the young women of Boaz until the end of the harvest. Now, we're going to pause in the story here until next week, but in the meantime, I want you to think about this. In secular contexts, redemption. Redemption refers to the process by which people and property and even prestige are restored to a family that has lost them through poverty or violence or some other cause. And we see this in literature and stories and movies. But the Redeemer is a designated person, usually a designated family member, who's expected to recover what was lost, what had been removed from family control. In other words, redemption returns you to yourself, to who you are meant to be. But at this point in the story, because we're just getting into it, I'm wondering, we meet these characters, Naomi and Ruth and Boaz. I'm wondering if you identify with any of these characters. The truth is, this story, it's a story about ordinary people in ordinary places, in ordinary times, just like ordinary us. And yet God did extraordinary things through them. But they didn't know that. They didn't recognize that. They didn't know that at the time. They just were flapping their wings, so to speak, like the butterfly. And then there were these sort of far-reaching consequences later on down the road. Naomi, Ruth, Boaz, they're some of the saints who have gone before us. Their loyalty, their chesed, their decisions and actions have had far-reaching consequences. They've had a huge impact. And so today, especially, we remember them and those others who have gone before us. They're the saints that we know through our history, but there are saints that we know through our own personal experience as well. And we're grateful. We're grateful for those who have gone before us and have led us to be who we are now and to where we are now. And someday there will be people who will come after us. And they will look at our pictures and they will see our names and they'll hear our stories. And they will thank God for the decisions we made and the actions that we took. And they'll call us saints. Because the saints are, all of us Christian people of every time and of every place. We're the saints right now with those who have gone before us, with those with us currently, and those who will come after us as well. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, saints. When you saints make decisions and take actions now that have consequences, that make a big impact, that have great influence on down the road later. Now, at the time, you're completely unaware of what's to come, right? I mean, at the time, it's just about being loyal, doing chesed, acting in God's steadfast love. But you don't know what's to come. You don't know what will happen on down the road. We don't know that yet. But God does. Thanks be to God.